Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Nittany Lion Sports Report. Bob Long, Tyler Gehlhaus alongside. Wow. What a interesting week in college football. And we welcome you to our set here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Working out some new kinks, Tyler, but we're excited to be here and excited to talk some Penn State football as well as so much else because the college football landscape is changing. And when you look at the rankings right now, it's a lot different than what we expected before. We do have an action-packed hour for you. We'll talk Penn State homecoming as they took down Rutgers 35-6, and then we have so much else going on in college football. We felt it was too much to bring on a guest, Tyler, so we will stave that off until next week and just go you and me for the full hour. Excited for that.
Very excited for it. A lot to break down. Obviously, two of the top four teams, Georgia and Notre Dame, went down. They both got crushed on the road. Two rivals, you could say. So a lot to break down. Looking forward to it.
This is, once again, the Nittany Lion Sports Report. My name is Bob Long. His name is Tyler Gehlhaus. We have Tom Trainer helping us off camera with the technical aspects and making our studio look so pretty. So the theme for the show, Tyler, that we will work into everything we talk about, and it's unfortunate, is what you see right behind me. 4 points and 3 games ago. For the Nittany Lions, they went into the Ohio State game undefeated at the top of the Big Ten and the number 2 team in the country. After that game, they dropped that game by 1 point, had one loss on the resume. Another tough loss by 3 points to Michigan State, cleaning up at Rutgers, at home against Rutgers, I should say, after what was an abysmal first quarter. But nonetheless, they were able to get the win. So 3 games, really the difference as we take a look at this Nittany Lion season, all but mathematically eliminated from the Big Ten championship race. Really, they would need Ohio State to lose 2 games out of the East in order to win. In order to win on, in theory, a tiebreaker, they would need one more loss from Michigan State because Michigan State has the head-to-head against Penn State, and then they would also need one more loss from the Buckeyes. So, 2 more losses for the Buckeyes. Illinois, and then the game against Michigan. So I think we can forget that one, Tyler. But we'll talk briefly about the game this weekend against Rutgers, preview the game against Nebraska. But the same issues that we saw in those 2 games that cost them, the 4 points that were the difference in this season, still having trouble running the football. Saquon Barkley, 35 yards on the ground, and that was it. I mean, Tyler, what's the issue here? In a game where they had to lateral a pass for him to get a touch and then ran him in from the 1-yard line, what is going on with this offensive line?
I wish I knew the answer to it, Bob. Unfortunately, I do not. I do know that obviously they played their second full game without left tackle Ryan Bates, which is a huge loss. However, I don't think there's really any excuse for only getting Barkley. I think it was like 14 carries, 35 yards. Against Rutgers. I mean, really against any team with a talent like that in the backfield. I find that very upsetting that he's only getting 35 yards against a Rutgers team. I'm not sure. They're really not using him that much in the pass game either. Like you said, the hook and ladder was a nice play. That was his most notable catch of the game. I did see an article out there that maybe Penn State's line, I'm not sure if you saw this, but Penn State's line, maybe the way in which some of the guys were lined up in their stance was giving the other team actually a clue to, whether it was a run or a pass based on how some of the offensive linemen were lining up. I read an article about that. Not sure if that's accurate or not. It did come from CBS Sports.
Came specifically from
Jonathan Vilma, right, a longtime linebacker in the NFL. So it's an interesting article. I mean, I really hope that's, I want to say I hope that's not the case because that's embarrassing at this level of football. But, I mean, if it was the case, hopefully it's an easy fix. So,
an easy fix as there's 2 games left in the regular season against Nebraska and against Maryland. Now, we talked all year about how this offensive line, Tyler, was just not nearly as, we'll say, mature as you might expect with regard to the amount of guys that are playing as redshirt freshmen, sophomores, et cetera, et cetera. Jonathan Vilma did call out specifically the tackles, so that either brings you to Ryan Bates at the left tackle position, if we're granting this as having validity, or the revolving door at right tackle a little bit of Andrew Nelson, but more likely, if he's talking about the 2 weeks leading into, or the week leading into then the Ohio State game and the Michigan State game, he's probably talking about Will Fries.
Or even Chaz Wright.
Or even Chaz Wright for the time he played, but he saw a little bit less time, going
right.
As the season went on, and you saw more Will Fries actually winning that job. I didn't go back and watch that tape. I'd be very interested to see those specifically on the Penn State beat that write about this every day. I'd actually be interested to see what Andrew Callahan said about that. He's usually about the best there is on that beat in terms of breaking things down. But I find it interesting that Vilma had the guts to say that on national radio on ESPN, and the fact that I think he said that may tell you that there's something to it. And again, he's a very learned, a very advanced football mind. He's taken that into the broadcasting space. And, specifically, he also said that he noticed it during the Northwestern game, but elected not to say anything about it because Penn State was still in the national championship race. And that's disappointing if that's indeed the case.
Is that something that the coaches really wouldn't notice? I mean, if other teams are noticing that, how would our coaches not notice that? I mean, that's very concerning if that's the case. I know a lot of times in the offense that Penn State runs, it's a run-pass option type of offense, and I know a lot of the times, third and long, the tackles might have a little different stance. They're getting ready to pass block, but is it like that? I mean, I have to really go back too and watch because I haven't noticed anything, but I haven't watched it that closely to see the way the tackle lines up. I mean, if the other teams can notice it, I just find it very troubling that our own coaches didn't figure out, oh, look at how he's lined up on this play, so-and-so compared to this play. And because, I mean, if a sports analysis is a football analysis figuring that out and our coaches don't realize that, and if that's really the case, that's a whole nother set of problems there.
Without a doubt it is, and it's something that hasn't really been addressed. I haven't seen anybody on the Penn State beat come out and make a statement one way or the other, going back and checking film. There may be something to that as well, not wanting to go on the record on something like that. Maybe just let that lie.
And tomorrow's James Franklin's press conference early afternoon, so I'm sure the question will be asked. I'm not sure if he'll say, what, yeah, we realized that we were tipping our plays. I don't think any coach is really going to admit that.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure he's going to be asked about it because it's out there now, so we'll see how he handles that question.
It really is a fascinating item and a fascinating discussion to have. The other thing that we really keyed on when it came to this Rutgers game on Saturday is the idea that they want to get Saquon Barkley in space a lot more, and the different ways that they might be able to do that, specifically getting him into the pistol. So a pistol formation, Tyler, obviously the quarterback is in a position where he's a little bit shallower than a shotgun, but he's still receiving it essentially being snapped instead of being under center, right? So he's going to get snapped back to him. The running back then stands directly behind the quarterback a few yards back and can get a little bit of a downhill start. Moorhead thinking, all right, let's throw a little wrinkle in here and try to figure this out. Unfortunately for Penn State, did not work whatsoever. 35 yards on the 14 carries for Saquon Barkley. At some point, when you see scheme after scheme after scheme, and this is a way where the best player in football should be able to get some downhill momentum, if he's unable to do that, Tyler, at some point, I think we pump the brakes on the coaching questions. What do you think? Was that a good issue? Something to try? Was that a good remedy? Was that reaching? I mean, how
going to the pistol?
Yep.
How often did they actually run that? A couple times because it didn't really jump out to me. So I was watching another game actually live, and I was watching on my phone, so I may have missed it. But I think it's a good idea to get him running downhill. They're not going to go under center. They don't even do it when they're taking a knee. They're not going to put a fullback in. So that's probably the next best option is to get the pistol, get him getting Saquon Barkley running downhill because a lot of the problem that I have, and the one play that specifically jumped out to me was a read option, and Barkley's literally standing still pretty much when he gets it. The guy, Mike Gesicki, doesn't even block his guy. The O-line actually all blocked. Gesicki missed his assignment. The guy got in there. As soon as the ball was handed off to Barkley, he was smacked right away by the Rutgers defender. And obviously there was a missed block, but I still am not a fan of I'm all right. I like the read option. I do like that, but I don't like sometimes how long these plays are taking to develop and just holding it, because the defensive line is just engaging on the backfield. So it's either they're going to tackle Barkley for a 5-yard loss, or they're going to tackle McSorley for a 5-yard loss at that point, unless he can get rid of it.
Right.
So I just think it's slow developing, and I think the pistol is a good way to get the ball, Barkley getting the ball going downhill faster.
Slow developing. I mean, clearly the RPO is somewhat. I don't even know if that's the way I'd describe it. I understand, and I'm okay with you describing it that way. For me, it's about just playing off leverage and playing off matchups. A lot of times when you run a pure RPO, you won't block the outside, the weak side 3 technique defensive end. And so what happens there is normally you want to get enough blocking and get the play moving enough where you are actually forcing that 3 technique to make a decision, and then the quarterback reads it. That's the whole premise of the formation. But what's happened this time is that you're right, maybe it's a touch slow moving, but there's so much penetration elsewhere that 3 technique can feel confident enough to run right at both McSorley and Barkley and simply try to take them down. And you see Hubbard at Ohio State, he took them both down at the same time. And you've seen that far, far too often. Guys are just penetrating these holes, and it's unfortunate that what I believe is a very, very intelligent and really the rule of the day type offense, their RPO. I mean, listen, Ohio State ran the same thing against Penn State. It looked a lot different coming from that offense than it did against Penn State. I wouldn't say that Penn State was any more slow developing than Ohio State's. I just think they can block. And they have some depth there, and they wore down Penn State, and Penn State was on the other end of that coin. Yeah,
and I mean, the offense, compared to the years before Joe Moorhead, his offense does look obviously substantially better, and the numbers show for it. The only complaint I have with it is the running game. I mean, you have the best running back that the school has probably ever seen, the top draft prospect at the position, maybe a couple years, decades, they've said, for Barkley. It's just frustrating to have a talent like that, and he's running for 35 yards against anybody, but let alone Rutgers.
Right. So?
And Nebraska just gave up, I don't even know, it was a lot of rushing yards to Minnesota last week. So hopefully Penn State can take advantage of that defense. And if they can't, I mean, I already have some serious doubts about Penn State being able to run the ball. That would even create even more doubts that I have if they can't run the ball against Nebraska.
So the Nittany Lions, a 29-point winner last week, as you could probably tell from our tones to start the show here. I mean,
31-point favorites, right?
Yeah.
And we both said over, so close, but no cigar.
That's true. They did not quite cover. I mean, I say that in jest, Tyler. We're giving this team a really hard time. They are, at this point, a 2-loss team and look to have a really good shot to win their last 2 and go 10-2 on the year. An 8-2 clip is not bad to start, of course, and the issue is just what could have been. And the issue as well is that this is a team that people thought would be able to run the ball much better. It was an offensive line that people thought would be a lot stronger when the year started, and it just hasn't been the case. But I think it is important to take a step back and say this is an improved Rutgers team. They were, I believe, 500 coming into this game. Oddly enough, mathematically had an opportunity, I think, to win the East coming into this game. But that is no longer the case, and Rutgers is out. But I think, it's just very difficult to evaluate this Penn State team because they did have what I believe, and we talked about it at length last year, I think at the end of the day will be a very, very good year. And the expectations coming into it were something that I think, unfortunately, has put some fans and the players in a tough spot to try to really try, I don't really know how to say it, but to really manage what those expectations would end up being.
Because they haven't had expectations like this since probably, 08 maybe?
Yeah,
if that.
Sure.
It's been a while.
Sure, 08, 09, the 09 year.
And high expectations are a good thing. So it takes a lot more. There's
them.
A lot more disappointment oftentimes, but with that, there's great success like we saw last season.
I think they earned what they got in terms of the expectations. They were the number 2 team in the country. They beat Michigan by 29 points. This is just unfortunately a team that ran out of gas in the fourth quarter twice. The Michigan State game, I think, especially hurts because, truly at the end of the day, Tyler, this team would be in a really good spot right now had they not lost to Michigan State, even with the Ohio State loss.
They would be in an unbelievable spot right now. Even if Ohio State wins out, Ohio State still would have gone, correct, to the Big Ten championship. But Penn State would have been sitting at home with that one loss. But Ohio State's loss by 20-something to Iowa would have really been tough for them to put Ohio State in over Penn State at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. I think so, and we'll take a look at the top 13 right now. I mean, this is the AP and the coaches. Obviously, tomorrow we will have the college football playoff come out, but Alabama number 1, Miami. Look at that. The Hurricanes picking up 4 first-place votes. Up 5 spots in the AP, up 4 in the coaches. Oklahoma at number 3, Clemson at number 4, Wisconsin at number 5, Auburn 6, Georgia 7. What a game that was at Jordan-Hare Stadium. The Tigers taking down the Georgia Bulldogs and doing so in convincing fashion. That game would have been a 30-point win if not for a late touchdown score from Georgia. Then Ohio State at 8, Notre Dame at 9, getting blown off the field by Miami. Oklahoma State at 10, TCU 11, which we're going to talk about that as well, because I think that could mean a little something. I think personally TCU should be ranked above Oklahoma State at this point. Then Southern Cal and Penn State, and I have certainly some thoughts on that as well, that could affect Southern Cal on a long shot basis. But Tyler, anything that jumps out at you as you look at that?
The only thing that jumps out to me is the main thing that jumps out to me is all of the 2-loss teams, and I think only one of them controls their own destiny right now, and that is Auburn. If you can pull up the Auburn schedule, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take one more look at the top 13 here as we pull up the Auburn schedule, but Auburn right there at 6, you see in the coaches poll, and I tend to think that's right where they will be, but they have so many opportunities against teams in front of them.
So if Auburn beats who do they play this week?
Louisiana Monroe.
So assuming they beat Louisiana Monroe and then they host.
Don't knock it. They held LSU to 21 points a couple years ago. No, there's no chance. But
they're at home against Alabama, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Jordan-Hare Stadium.
So if Auburn beats Alabama, they go to the SEC championship where they will play the team they just throttled, Georgia. If they win out, they're getting a spot, 2-loss team. The only 2-loss team that controls their own destiny right now is Auburn. What else jumps out to me?
Well, so remember, you look at the schedule a little bit more in depth. You see the second game of the season, a 1-possession loss to Clemson.
On the road.
Mm-hmm. And
they lost at the other Death Valley as well. They lost at 2 Death Valleys. LSU, they had that game too. And they
that was unbelievable.
Yeah, and they blew and the other thing that jumps out to me is, not that I'm surprised, but Miami ranked 2. I mean, this isn't the college football playoff, but frankly, they deserve to be there. They really do.
Can I give you a thought, though, and we'll give our rankings later in the show? I don't think they will be number 2 tomorrow. I think they're number 3. I think Oklahoma is going to be number 2. Think about it this way, right? Oklahoma was ranked a couple spots above Miami. I think they had an equally impressive win over TCU.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, there's an ESPN factor. There's also that rivalry factor, Catholic versus convicts, and I think that might have something to do with all the fanfare we're seeing and the turnover chain and all that. They beat Syracuse by 1 possession, North Carolina on their third quarterback by 1 possession, 5 points. They've been great the last couple weeks, don't get me wrong, but
they still have that 0, though. 0 losses in the loss column.
Yep.
I think that. I wouldn't be surprised either if Oklahoma's too. I mean, they look very impressive, and I would pick Oklahoma to beat Miami if they played. I think Oklahoma is the second best team. I think that Oklahoma, Alabama national championship would be very entertaining. I think they probably are the 2 best teams right now, but we shall see.
Any type of friendly wager you want to throw on that number 2 for tomorrow night?
Yeah, we can do something.
Anything you ever wanted to embarrass me by doing on the show here? I don't have anything for you, to be honest. At spur of the moment.
We could think of something.
All right.
So who do you think Oklahoma's 2?
I think Oklahoma's 2, Miami is 3.
Okay, I kind of think that's going to be it, but I'll take the Hurricanes.
Right.
I'll take the Hurricanes.
All right.
I'll take them at 2.
I like it. So we continue to move on here. Clemson, Wisconsin's the other one. Let's look at the Wisconsin schedule quickly here as they play against the Michigan Wolverines coming up after thrashing an Iowa Hawkeyes team that just beat Ohio State by 31 points. Minnesota on the road, PJ Fleck, one last opportunity for his team. And listen, I see 2 wins there. I see 2 wins, and I see Wisconsin going undefeated to the Big Ten championship game.
It absolutely should be 2 wins. The funny thing is with Wisconsin, they're going to be the underdog more than likely in the Big Ten championship. For the first time this year, they'll be an underdog, and that would be more than likely against Ohio State. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but I mean, as funny as it sounds, that could even be a de facto play-in game for the college football playoff. If some other things happen, can't count Ohio State out as much as I hate to say it. It seems like they get lucky almost every year with this kind of stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got lucky again this year. And I do have a severe problem with it, and we can talk about it a little bit with the 2 lost teams and how they're going to stack them.
Let's do that. All right, we have the Ohio State Buckeyes schedule up right now. They had a loss to Oklahoma, 31-16, obviously well documented in week number 2. And if they put it together after that, I would understand. I would completely understand, and I think they would deserve it. With a win over Penn State, and if they won out from there, I would totally understand it. This is November the 4th, less than 1 month before the end of the season, and they go and absolutely get obliterated, embarrassed on the road against Iowa. And here's, from a Penn State perspective as well, one thing that really is interesting. If Penn State had beaten Michigan State, they absolutely would be, I believe, in a better spot than Ohio State to get into the college football playoff, even though, and I think there's a lot of merit to this, Penn State's loss last year out of conference to Pittsburgh versus Ohio State's loss to Oklahoma this year, makes all the difference in the world. But had Penn State beaten Michigan State, Ohio State's 48-3 win against Michigan State would have not looked nearly the same as a 45-point win over the number 12 team in the country. It would have been a 45-point win against an unranked Michigan State Spartans team that's on their way to 4 or 5 losses this year. That's the difference, unfortunately, for Penn State between really being in the driver's seat and cheering for Ohio State to beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game and feeling somewhat comfortable because Ohio State, they would have the 1 win against Penn State, and that's about it, truly.
Right.
Penn State would have done everything right. They would have gone to the horseshoe, led for 56 minutes, lost by 1 point in a game that they, again, led for the entire game, most of the time by 2 possessions. And the committee would have had to have taken a step back and decided whether to truly include a 2-loss Ohio State team that got obliterated by Iowa, didn't really have a phenomenal win because, again, Michigan State in this theoretical example would have lost to Penn State, would not have been number 12, but instead unranked. I truly believe that they had everything in front of them if they just had beaten Michigan State.
I agree, and it's a shame because without that weather delay, I think that a 3.5+ hour weather delay, that was really the nail in the coffin, in my opinion. I think Penn State was the better team, the more talented team, playing up to the weather delay. They were playing pretty well. They were up 14-7. I just think mentally that took them out of it. It made Michigan State came out firing. I mean, it's things you can't control, like the weather, but they could control how they came out of that. They just weren't ready. Mentally, I can imagine why. But it's a shame. Honestly, if it wasn't for that storm, they probably win that game and are going to finish the season 11-1 with all of this chaos that they needed to happen happening.
A lot more to get to here on the show tonight. Like we said, no guests. So Tyler and Bob going the whole way. We got Tom on the controls here. And this has been fun so far, but so much more to get to. We're going to have our top 10s coming down. We're going to go through more of the schedules as we just did, predicting our college football playoff and talking so much more. So, again, this is the Nittany Lion Sports Report live on BLS. Excited to be here with everybody. What a great evening ahead we still have, and we go until 9. We're on Facebook Live, and so you can get at us with your comments. Any comments, questions, or thoughts, we welcome all of them. See you soon.
What does your character look like? Does it bounce back after each setback? Does it stand out by standing up? Does it make good on good intentions? Character is invisible until it's not. Only through action will the world know what it's made of, what you're made of. Find out how you can strengthen the character of your community alongside empowered veterans and families of the fallen at travismanion.org.
People ask me why I'm giving up a year of my life to help kids. I say, who says I'm giving up anything?
If kids who drop out are 8 times more likely to end up in prison, do we open more prisons or minds?
What's going on, folks? This is Bob Long from Bob Long Sports. We're live here at the Wells Fargo Center before each and every Philadelphia Soul home game. We record this now before Arena Bowl 30, and the Philadelphia Soul, the winningest team in Philadelphia. Bob Long Sports is your spot for live video pregame shows with Bob Long, Eric Nash, and Rob Stott. We even have the opportunity to talk with the AFL Commissioner, Scott Butera. We appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. You do a terrific job, and God bless all of you and the folks of Philadelphia. I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate it.
Tune in before every home game for the Philadelphia Soul official pregame show on Bob Long Sports. Welcome back, everybody. The Nittany Lion Sports Report here on BLS. Bob Long, Tyler Gehlhaus, so excited to be with you. Tyler, as we bring it back to the show here, there we do have a question or two on the Facebook Live that we'll get to, and then we're going to talk a lot about the 2 lost teams and what each of them has to do to find their way to the college football playoff.
Sure. So the question that came in on Facebook was from Kim Gehlhaus, also my mother, wondering if Saquon Barkley is still in the Heisman hunt.
I wish.
I think to answer the question, yes, he will probably be invited to the ceremony.
I think so.
The other answer to that is no, he will not win it. You're probably looking at a Baker Mayfield to lose Heisman right now. He's thrown for over 3,500 yards, 31 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions, and the Sooners are rolling over teams right now. Since that loss to Iowa State, you got to figure Baker Mayfield is the lead dog right now in the clubhouse. And another thing with the Heisman, it's usually a quarterback that wins it because they always have the ball in their hands. For a running back to win it, you're looking at he's got to have the yards, the touchdowns, the glamour, which Barkley does have, but right now he does not have the yards. And he also, what he doesn't have going for him is a chance really at a national championship, which the last couple running backs to win it, Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, were on national championship teams. So that's another thing that definitely factors into the conversation when you're looking at running backs for the Heisman.
Yeah. No, it's a great question from Kim, and it's one of those things where it's quite disappointing because it was all in front of them. I mean, for a vast part of the season,
it was his to lose.
He was
it was his to lose.
Absolutely the top horse. And there were 3 to 4 games where his deficiencies, and it's not him personally, but in terms of his statistical performance, there were things lacking that were, I think, being not necessarily ignored, but overlooked, right? So the fact that he really wasn't getting the push in the few weeks leading up to the bye, specifically that Northwestern game. Well, okay, the game against Indiana, he really struggled on the ground, but he had one pretty long run, and then he had the kick return for a touchdown. So he goes for over 200 total yards. And then he throws the touchdown against Indiana. There were things like that for the vast majority of this season, I think, masked the deficiencies of that offensive line to those that were not in state college, and that kept him in the race for a long time. Just unfortunate that, again, 14 rushes for 35 yards this week.
Against Rutgers.
All too many weeks in a row where that or some, really some manifestation of that has happened. And he doesn't have a national title chance.
Or really a Big Ten championship at this point. And did you know that they've Penn State at 4 separate times this year at the half? Northwestern,
Iowa,
Michigan State.
I don't even know what
Rutgers,
you're going for, but I think I know what you're talking about.
Well, he had minus
yards. Didn't he have it?
I don't know about Iowa because he ended up having like over 200 some all-purpose yards. I'm not sure what his halftime stats were for Iowa, but I know you know what? I think it was Indiana actually because he had the long kick return.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Indiana, Northwestern, and then Michigan State and Rutgers, who he had negative yards. I might have one of those games wrong, but I know 3 of them are right. And that's, the
best player in college football.
Yeah, you can't have negative yards. Granted, he's broken off big runs in those games, but that's not good for anybody, let alone the best runner in college football.
That's amazing. That's absolutely unbelievable. And those are all games in the middle of the season as well.
Yeah.
So really, he had whatever it was, 3-4 pretty great games to start, and then he just, unfortunately, could not get going at any point. It's an unfortunate answer. I don't think that he has any shot right now. I do think he'll get invited, without a doubt.
He should get invited.
Almost.
How many do they invite now? 3 or 4?
I think they can invite up to 5 if
up
they
to 5.
choose.
So it's going to be.
They're not going to bring somebody there that doesn't really deserve it. But for all the hype that he got to start the season, I think it would almost be embarrassing not to invite him.
He should be invited. It's going to be Mayfield, Saquon Barkley,
Bryce Love.
You might even throw Josh Adams, a local kid out of Warrington, CB South, running back at Notre Dame.
Yep.
Mason Rudolph, maybe the quarterback at Oklahoma State. I don't know.
So that would be your 5th.
Yeah, I don't know right now. There's not. Everyone was saying J.T. Barrett after the Penn State game, and then he goes out and throws like 18 interceptions against Iowa. So I think he's out of it. But I also think that the Heisman, and you might differ from me in this, but I think it is a little overhyped. I think that it's a great honor. It would be great for Saquon to win for Penn State, for himself, for his team. But I think it's a little overhyped, the award itself. And I say that because I look back at past winners, and they did great things in college, but that doesn't translate really to the next field at all. But that's not what the award's about. But I think that there is a little overhype in it, and frankly, the best player in all of college football could be a lineman somewhere, that we just don't. He doesn't get the recognition. If you really look back at the high, like I know like Jason White won it for Oklahoma.
He had a great year.
Eric Crouch at Nebraska. So there's guys that have won it, and you don't even really. Tim Couch was quarterback at Kentucky.
Yeah.
Eric Crouch was quarterback at Nebraska.
It's funny, yeah. I'm thinking.
And then he went to the NFL and played like receiver for a little bit, but never really did anything.
Yep.
So
I'm thinking of Peter Crouch, by the way. I don't know if you're a soccer guy.
No, I am not. But what are your honest thoughts about the Heisman? Because I think it is a great award, but I think it gets a little overhyped. I think the media. They try to play it up. It's good for ratings and for people to watch, but for them to have a Heisman breakdown every week, I don't know.
So you're saying compared to, say, like the best player in baseball or the best player in football, hockey, at the professional level now, the fact that they're not having those discussions.
I think
from
sometimes
MVP?
that the media makes a bigger deal, maybe not a bigger deal, but in pro football right now, it's all about like the playoff rate. And MVP talks come up, but I feel like Heisman talks come up just as much as like playoff talks come up sometimes in college football. I think it's right up there, whereas in the NFL, it's all about like who's going to make the playoffs. And MVP gets mentioned, but not as much as the Heisman Trophy does for college. I mean,
I guess. Yeah. I guess.
I think it's talked about a lot more, and it's like a bigger deal than the MVP of the NFL, which it might be. It's definitely more of a historic.
All right, so
trophy
let's compare somewhat apples to apples then. I guess you're right in that the college basketball landscape doesn't really have the equivalent
of
the
Naismith?
Yeah, they don't have the equivalent of a Heisman Trophy. Quite honestly, being first-team All-American is probably it's not as big of an honor as the Naismith, but it gets talked about more so than, say, first-team All-American in football does to the Heisman.
Right.
There's such that name and brand recognition with the Heisman, and the fact that there's only 5 guys on the basketball.
But for a team sport like football, I just think that they talk about that individual award a lot, and rightfully so. I mean, it is a big deal, and I mean, we all know like the advertisement, the Heisman House that they show before games. Like they really do hype up the Heisman, and I think it's a great award that I wish Barkley was still, and I guess he still could win it, but I don't see him winning it. I mean, it's a great honor for him and for the other nominees. But you know, I mean, even if you ask Saquon Barkley, he's already said it 1,000 times, he'd rather have a championship over the Heisman, and I think most players would.
Yeah, without a doubt. I don't think that's a crazy comment or statement, but the Heisman is just it's the greatest honor in college football from an individual perspective. I guess I see what you're saying, but I don't know. I mean, it's a great honor. I'll give it that
it's okay to disagree.
No, sure.
Yeah,
I get that it has more of a resonation than, say, the most valuable player, because every sport has the most valuable player, and only college football has a Heisman Trophy. So, yeah, I see what you're saying. But do you want to get to 2 lost teams?
Sure, let's get to 2 lost teams.
All right, I know you love this stuff. So we're going to pull up the top 13 once again and get this conversation started this way. Auburn listed as the top 2 lost team at number 6. Ohio State is there at number 8. Notre Dame at 9. Oklahoma State at 10. TCU at 11. All right, so I'm going to start with this one because I'll let you go off on Ohio State. I'll let you go off on Auburn, which, by the way, we were a little bit ahead of the game 2 weeks ago when we started talking about Auburn and their path to this playoff, that they actually did control their own destiny way back in, what would that be, week 9? Whatever week that was, 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
But TCU and Oklahoma. TCU and Oklahoma will almost certainly play once again. And the reason I say that is because there are no divisions in the Big 12 as of really since they restructured it to be a 10-team league. But this year, for the first year, they have a Big 12 championship game. So TCU has a tiebreaker over Oklahoma State, which is the only other team in the conference that really would have a chance. Iowa State has lost a couple now and really has taken themselves out of it. So, assuming that they beat Texas Tech on the road in Lubbock, which, by the way, I saw a game there 2 weekends ago, and there was just nobody in the building. I mean, they have given up on that Texas Tech team. It was a nice day in Texas.
They're fun to watch,
nobody
too.
there.
They air the ball around the yard.
Yep.
That's
nobody
surprising.
there. Nobody at all.
Who
anyway,
was that the Kansas State game?
It was.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think that's when was that when Penn State had their rain delay?
It was.
Yeah,
it was that same day.
And the
they
same
came
channel.
on right after.
Okay.
Anyway, that game and then Baylor. So assuming they win out, they should get to the Big 12 championship game. As I was kind of insinuating before, if TCU wins, since there's no divisions, I'm getting lost here. Since there's no divisions, they're not taking the top team from an East and a West, a North and a South. Instead, what they're doing is they are literally taking the top 2 teams. It doesn't matter if they would have played the last game of the regular season, which is also why they pushed Bedlam up by 4 weeks this year. Those 2 teams will go to the Big 12 championship game. So TCU could win those 2 games and then, in theory, go play Oklahoma and beat Oklahoma at a neutral site. So let's say that TCU, after getting hammered on the road by Oklahoma, beats the Sooners in a game on a neutral site. So what's the value of a neutral site game versus losing on the road in Norman, where this team has been playing very, very well? I don't know. Both teams now have 2 losses, and TCU, again, I think the Big 12 is the most balanced conference in college football. Their losses were to Oklahoma, bigger than they would have liked, and then a game against Iowa State where they held them to 7 points. Big win against Oklahoma State earlier in the year, pulling up their schedule. They did go out and schedule Arkansas. Unfortunately, Arkansas not great this year. Southern Methodist, not a great team this year either, but they made the effort to go out and schedule. Beat up on Texas pretty well, something that another 2-loss team couldn't do, Southern Cal. They beat West Virginia. That's a decent team that, by the way, Oklahoma still has to play in the final week of the season. How would TCU match up against Oklahoma if TCU were to win that game?
Well, this is actually, in my opinion, where the Big 12 has goofed. I think this is a mistake to have this conference championship without divisions for the sole purpose of you have if you don't have a conference championship, Oklahoma's going to the playoff. But now, since they have a conference championship without divisions, their best hope is for Oklahoma to beat TCU again on a neutral site this time. And we all know it's hard to beat a team twice. TCU might come out hungrier than Oklahoma. You just never know. The Big 12 really may have shot themselves in the foot here, because if TCU does win that game against Oklahoma, I don't think that either one of those teams would get in, because, one, TCU has 2 losses, but they're conference champion, which is great. But the fact that they already got blown out by the team that they just beat is really, it's strange to me, and it's never, I don't think college football committee has ever had to deal with something like that, an entity like that, because I don't think that's ever happened. So with the Big 12, they may have shot themselves in the foot. I do think that Oklahoma will win, though.
Okay, you think they win?
Yes.
And if they don't win,
then I
they're
think
out.
the Big 12 is probably on the outside looking in.
Really?
I think so.
So Ohio State jumps 2 Big 12
They
teams
did it.
on the
They
last
did it.
weekend
They
of the
did it a
season
couple.
again.
Yep. They did it a couple years ago.
Oh man!
But you don't know if they're going to beat Wisconsin.
No, I don't.
So we're saying hypothetically here.
But if Ohio State loses that game, they're still in it. They're still in it. Come on.
They might be the 1 seed.
Yeah.
They jump Alabama.
Listen, we're deep second level thinkers here. This Ohio State team really, when you think about it, has all the tools to be top team in the country. It was just some self-inflicted mistakes against Iowa that was the difference, don't you think?
Some. Yeah, I guess
Just a
it was
couple.
Just a few.
Just a couple.
Just a few.
All right, where were we? Back to the top 25 here. 2 lost teams. Who do you want to look at next?
All right, well, if we rank the 2 lost teams, if we could just do that outside of our
how
top,
good they
or
are,
do you want to do our top 10s? And then we can, obviously our 2 lost teams will factor into that.
Drive the boat, man.
All right, so
what do you like?
I'm going Alabama 1. For the sake of our gentleman's bet, I'll go Miami 2.
All right.
At 3, I'm going to throw in Oklahoma. At 4, I have Clemson. At 5, I have Wisconsin. So same as the AP. Even up until this point, I think that actually really up till 7 is what I think the college football playoff will be. I think Auburn does jump Georgia, even if they have the 1 loss, because they just smoked them. But then this is where it gets tricky to me. So I have Auburn as my top 2-loss team. They also are the only 2-loss team that controls their own destiny right now. After them, you have teams like Ohio State, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State, TCU, USC, and Penn State, all with 2 losses. And this is where it gets very interesting, because none of them have real good chances right now of making the playoff. You could say Notre Dame is completely eliminated because they don't have a conference championship. This is where things get really interesting to me, because Ohio State had arguably one of the most embarrassing losses of the season. And when I characterize my 2 lost teams, obviously you're looking at who they lost to. So if all these teams have 2 losses and your second loss is by such a margin like that, where Penn State had 2 losses on the road back-to-back weeks against ranked teams by a total of 4 points, Okay, and Ohio State loses by 20-something to Iowa, and they also lost at home to Oklahoma, which is obviously a really good team. I do have an issue with that. And then also if Notre Dame's above Penn State after getting smoked by Miami, those are concerning points for me. But again, I don't think any of those teams are going to make it. I think Ohio State might have an outside chance of a 2-loss team. But like I said, Auburn controls their own destiny. But I think that and even USC, I know you have an argument against USC too with 2 losses. So,
I mean, that team. All right, Ohio State lost by 31 to Iowa.
31 it was.
31.
Wow.
What did I say? Yeah.
I thought it was in the 20s, but 31, that's
55-24.
Oh my God.
Southern Cal loses by 35 points to Notre Dame, a team who you are saying is eliminated. Notre Dame and Southern Cal could end the season with the same amount of losses. Southern Cal losing by 35 points to Notre Dame. They win a game. Let's see. They beat either Stanford or Washington in the Pac-12 championship game, a team that has at least 2 losses. In theory, if it's Stanford, actually it's almost certainly going to be Stanford now with the head-to-head over Washington. Notre Dame could and would, for this situation to make itself apparent, they would have beaten Stanford as well the week before Southern Cal would beat them in the Pac-12 championship game. So same amount of losses. They beat the same team in consecutive weeks, Stanford. That Stanford team now becomes a 4-loss team, no longer an absolutely unbelievable win for Southern Cal. And the Trojans get in over the Irish. Why? Help me out.
I don't know.
Because of the
I don't have
value
an
of
answer.
a conference championship. Man. I'm not angry at you or anybody else. It's just I don't get it.
I don't.
I just don't get it.
And the 2 losses, and if like I said, Penn State is probably not going to play for the playoff, but I still think that the team should be ranked fairly. The 2-loss teams, and I think you would still have to put Ohio State above them because they did beat them. But Notre Dame should not be above either one of those teams after getting walloped by Miami.
Over either which team?
Penn State or Ohio State. I don't think you can.
Yeah.
I don't think you can.
I think that's fair.
Granted, they did lose to Georgia by 1. Penn State lost to Ohio State by 1 on the road.
Yeah.
Penn State lost to a then-ranked Michigan State team on the road by 3 after the delay. Whatever, say what you want about that. But then and then Notre Dame just goes out and lays an egg against Miami. I mean, I don't see how you can have Notre Dame above those 2 teams at this point of the season.
Yeah, I think that's a good argument. I mean, I'm absolutely on board with the argument. I also think TCU has an argument to really be in that discussion. You know,
I mean, and I don't know if Oklahoma State does though either. If they should really be in the discussion up that high, where do you rank your 2-loss teams? Because I think this is the year actually that there might be a 2-loss team that gets in.
Yeah, I agree. So Auburn is clearly the top one. But they also have the most in between them and remaining with 2 losses when we get to December 3rd or 4th, right? So they absolutely have the most to gain, but they could easily be out of this discussion.
With a loss to Alabama.
Yep. I mean, listen, even if they beat Alabama and they lose to Georgia, great run, pat on the back, but you have 3 losses. You're out, period. And so I think they're absolutely the top 1-loss team. In terms of the top 2-loss team, besides Auburn, I mean, there's deficiencies in every one of these teams. If you ask me who I actually think is the second best team, second best 2-loss team, is TCU.
Okay. I think it's probably still Ohio State, even though they have that really bad loss to Iowa, and then I'd put Penn State in right behind them, then TCU, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State, USC. I'm not impressed at all by USC this year. Not at all.
I don't
disagree. And they're doing the exact same thing they did last year, Bob, where they just kind of creep up towards the end of the year. They lose games early, and they creep up, and they're somehow still in the discussion, and I don't think that they're deserving of that at all. I mean, really, they're lucky that they only have 2 losses. I mean,
you're exactly right.
They pretty much almost lost to Texas in I believe it was overtime or close to it.
It was overtime.
It was overtime against Texas, and they beat Utah at home by 1 point when Utah went for 2 to win the game at the end of regulation. I mean, this is a team that's right on the brink of 4 losses.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, do you remember last year as well? I mean, this is a Southern Cal team that when they had 3 losses, bona fide analysts were out there saying that this is a 3-loss team that deserves real consideration in terms of getting into the playoff.
Right.
We haven't even had a 2-loss team get into the playoff, and people were talking about Southern Cal as a 3-loss team getting into the playoff. Now we have a quarterback in Sam Darnold that's had an average at best season. They have a decent win against, remember, Colorado. They were great last year. They beat them by 14 points last weekend. That's a team that has 6 losses right now. They're struggling to get bowl eligible. The Arizona Wildcats, they beat them by 14 points. Okay, they were kind of flash in the dark in terms of hanging in the Pac-12 South race. Arizona State stinks. Don't be fooled by the fact that they beat Washington. I mean, in the games, that's it. Those are the 3 games.
their best win
is
Stanford in week 2, USC.
Right.
That's their best win. It's a good win.
But those 3 games, right, climbing back after getting absolutely throttled by Notre Dame. The 3 games were Arizona State, Arizona, and then the last game against Colorado. None of those games are overly impressive to me.
And then they play. Wow, this is actually pretty interesting. I didn't realize this is their last game this week.
Their last game.
They don't have a bye in the Pac-12. There's no. I guess is that across the board? The Pac-12 doesn't have a bye, or
no, it's not that. Because remember, Stanford is playing Notre Dame.
That's true, but that's also out of conference. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it. But that's really weird that they end this week. I was just taking a look at that now. Wow, that's a little strange.
Yeah. But, I mean, again, I'll say this one more time. Stanford is very likely going to be in the North Championship, representing the North in the Pac-12 Championship. Notre Dame will have a chance to beat them the very week prior.
It's a tune-up game for Stanford, really, for the Pac-12 Championship.
And that's fine. We can see what personnel they play. But if
they're going to play to win the game, sure.
Because they're thinking maybe they have a back-end hope at 2 losses. But anyway,
right.
If Notre Dame beats Stanford and then Southern Cal beats Stanford the very next week, and all you've had is 4 weeks in between, 5 weeks now, in between the time that Notre Dame absolutely throttled USC, I'm not saying to put Notre Dame in the playoff because I don't think they deserve it, but how do you, with any conscience whatsoever, seriously consider Southern Cal for a championship run when I don't think they have the big wins? You have them being left out from a Notre Dame team that, I mean, completely out-physical and controlled the game. How? I told you I came in with a strong opinion on Southern Cal. That's it.
And you have every reason to have that strong opinion because I'm right there with you, and I'm sure a lot of other people are. I think the Pac-12 is, and I've said this for a couple of weeks now, they're eliminated. I don't think there's any team.
Yeah.
Washington lost again. There's no team in that conference that is deserving at all. All of those 2-loss teams that were just mentioned, with the exception of maybe Oklahoma State and also USC, are more deserving than the champion out of that conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't disagree. All right, here's one for you. Alabama. If they lose to Auburn.
Or Mercer.
Duke. Hey, they beat Duke. Do you remember
in
that?
Basketball.
That was great. So it could happen. Are they in no matter what at this point? I mean, unless they lose to Mercer, are they in no matter what?
If they win out, absolutely. If they win against Auburn, they win against Georgia. Here's where I run into a serious dilemma.
Yep.
If they beat Auburn, okay, so now you have an undefeated Alabama against a presumed to be 1-loss Georgia team in the SEC championship. Georgia wins, okay.
Okay.
I think that's the only way that they get 2 teams in the SEC. Yeah, I absolutely think that Alabama would still make it because of
the 1 loss
because
in the
of the log jam of 2-loss teams.
That's fair. I would agree with it. You want to have some fun though? Auburn loses in 2 weeks to Alabama. Georgia Tech beats Georgia.
And then Georgia
beats Alabama.
I mean,
Or
Penn State
better
could be
yet-
back in it at that point.
Why
You
not,
know-
right?
You never know.
Or better yet,
Hey.
Auburn beats Alabama. They lose, and then Georgia beats. I don't know. I still think Alabama would get in either way there.
I think Alabama is really.
But you could have the only team out of the SEC in the championship and the college football playoff being a team that didn't win the conference at that point.
Right, and it's so funny too that the two teams we're not talking about really are Miami and Wisconsin still. And I was wrong before the show. I said there's only one undefeated team left, and that's Alabama. I completely forgot that Miami and Wisconsin were undefeated just because they don't get the publicity.
Well, sure.
But I mean,
Did you say that? I
I did
missed
because
that.
at the beginning of the year I said I think Alabama will be the only team, if they even go undefeated, that would be able to go undefeated, because I thought there would be a lot of upsets and things of that nature, and just the parity of college football. But
Let's ask this while we're talking undefeated teams. No chance for UCF?
I forget. No, Beans. I forgot that they were undefeated too. No chance.
Is that? I mean, if everything.
Let me pull up their
If
schedule.
everything. I know their schedule is not good.
Let me
So
pull it up.
save the bandwidth. but-
Because do you even have that schedule on yours?
Nope, I don't
See?
have it. Save the bandwidth. It's not good.
I actually want to take a look at this.
That's fair.
Because if they're
I-
ranked 14, okay, so they.
Well, that was 14
Um,
in last week's college football playoff. No, they're okay, right.
This is it.
Four-
Well,
that's
it's
right, they're
unfortunate for them that their best game of the year arguably got canceled. I guess maybe that hurricane earlier in the season, Georgia Tech. That game got canceled for UCF.
That does hurt.
And Maine got. Wait, how many games did they get canceled? Memphis, Georgia Tech, and Maine.
Did you
I
say
don't-
Maine?
Yeah.
Shout out to Chris Ferguson, the starting quarterback there, as a redshirt freshman from the LaSalle Explorers. From 2 years ago, took them all the way to the quarterfinals of the state football tournament.
Is he
and beat
starting?
St.
He's
Joseph's
starting at
Prep,
Maine.
and he is starting. I believe, for what I believe to be an upset of sorts, where he went in there, wasn't expected to get the job this early, and did so. I
Okay.
really wanted to watch him. He came to Villanova the weekend I was in Gainesville, but big shout out. He was my favorite player on that LaSalle team. Good young man.
It's a similar story, actually, not to get off track, but quarterback for the Towson Tigers, Ryan Stover, family friend of mine.
Oh, there you go.
He actually played, he and Chris Ferguson, I believe, played together in youth football. Ryan Stover's quarterback for Upper Dublin. And I believe that's where Chris Ferguson's from, ultimately went to LaSalle for his high school ball. And
They would have met in the semis had they beaten Parkland, right?
Sure,
That year.
would they have? I'm not sure. Maybe, because Parkland
so.
ended up, is that who they played next?
Parkland played Upper Dublin, beat them, and then
Yeah,
went to the state
okay.
championship, lost to Central Catholic.
So, LaSalle lost to Parkland.
LaSalle lost
and then
to Parkland.
played Upper Dublin. Right, you are right. So Ryan actually had a similar fate this year with kind of just an injury ahead of him with the quarterback, and then he just kind of took it by the horns and has been starting ever since. He's been playing really good football
That's
too.
great.
So it's good to see the local kids at all the levels doing well at the next level.
Great.
But anyway, enough with the UCF talk. There's nothing here to see. Don't even waste your time to go look at it. Although they do play Temple this week at Temple.
There you go.
So if you're looking for something to do, go down to the link, 12 o'clock on Saturday, and watch the UCF, formerly Blake Bortles was the quarterback.
Yeah, that's
there.
right. And Storm Johnson.
Yeah, so if you wanna go see some Temple versus
They came in
UCF
and
football,
beat Penn
They
State.
did, and then Penn State went to Ireland and
Yep.
beat. I mean, good games.
Very good games. So, again, on UCF, I'm just grasping at straws here. But at some point, when do these two lost teams not deserve it? All right, Auburn deserves it, sure.
But
Ohio State doesn't deserve
Auburn's
it. Notre Dame doesn't deserve it. Oklahoma State doesn't deserve it. TCU doesn't deserve it. Southern Cal doesn't deserve it. You know, I think Penn State needs to win one of those two games to deserve it.
and they probably don't deserve it. But still, the funniest part about it is if you really want to get nitpicky with it, and you look at the losses, Penn State has the most impressive two loss teams,
Losses.
maybe outside of Auburn, but I'm talking 4 points total on the road against ranked teams. Auburn is probably the second most impressive in terms of that, but Auburn right now controls their own destiny.
Yeah, Auburn, I think, even better than Penn State because of the way they controlled that LSU game. LSU, I think, and Michigan State are very similar.
Yeah, I agree with that. But, I mean, you put Auburn and Penn State right there, and I mean, I mean, not to foreshadow a little bit, but that actually would be a heck of a bowl game, and it might be. It might be a bowl game. So
Which game? Sorry.
Auburn. If Auburn doesn't make the playoff, I could very well see Auburn, Penn State as a bowl game, and I'm also hearing skewing for you and Mara, but Penn State Notre Dame is being projected in some Cotton Bowl in the Cotton Bowl by
I did
some out. That'd be pretty cool as well. So
would you take the trip?
Probably not. Maybe if it's
so these bowl
if
games.
It's a Cotton Bowl, maybe because of the stadium. It'd be cool to go, not to go down to Jerry's World.
Yep.
I mean, the Eagles, I'm sure, will take care of business there on Sunday night. So hopefully, but it's definitely a place I want to visit. I was hoping maybe to visit for, a championship or a playoff game as opposed to a Cotton Bowl, but Cotton Bowl's still nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, and sort of close up on these thoughts. Are some of these other bowls being mitigated in terms of their importance? Are they being wiped to the side?
You know what? I
do
think
people
it's
not
like,
care about them
no,
anymore?
I think like that's a pretty good point because to me it's like obviously the playoff and then it's like New Year's 6, which is the new BCS Bowl. For those that don't know, the New Year's 6 is you have the two semi playoff games. Okay, so that's this year it's the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl, and then the other 4 games part of the New Year's 6: Cotton Bowl, Peach Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, and the Orange Bowl. So there are your other 4 games, and that's part of the New Year's 6. And then outside of that, you're looking at the Citrus Bowl, which is played in Orlando, formerly known as the Capital One Bowl. Penn State's had plenty of games there. And then you're looking at like an Outback Bowl for Penn State. I mean, it's looking like a New Year's 6 or probably a Citrus Bowl. I don't think that they would go as far as an Outback Bowl. I think that's more like a Michigan State right now. They're probably looking more of at an Outback Bowl with that loss to Ohio State. So, I mean, it still should be a great bowl game, great bowl trip for the team, for the fans. Again, nothing to be ashamed of, but when you could have taken care of business and when we see the board, it is
So
a little
close.
disappointing. Yeah.
4 and 7 years ago, just for those that didn't catch that reference at the beginning. Tyler, great show here. We rolled along. We'll bring back a guest next week, but we just felt there was a lot to talk about. With Penn State, we hit at the very beginning, the struggles with the RPO, the move to the pistol. Is it coaching? We talked a lot about that. And then so much in terms of the college football playoff. It's just so entertaining at this time of year. And
It
again,
is.
It's just the
Whether
loss
your team's in it or not, sometimes it's more entertaining when they're not because you're not as worried, paranoid about it. I mean, sure, it would be great right now, and I guess Penn State's still technically in it. Either way, it's exciting, and a lot is still going to shape out here, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens tomorrow night.
Big shout to Dave Berman, who does everything with everything that is DelcoHoops.com. I saw he gave us a shout. Great job, guys. Great to see shows like this down here in southeastern PA. And Dave's a friend of mine and a great steward and advocate for youth and amateur sports in this area. So great to see him check in. And thanks, everybody, for commenting on Facebook Live and tuning in this evening. It's been really fun for Tyler Gehlhaus and for Tom Trainer, who's offset. I'm Bob Long saying so long here from Philadelphia. The game this weekend, a home tilt against Nebraska, a 4 o'clock kick. It's a great time.
On FS1,
That's
for
right.
those that don't know.
That's why it's the weird time.
Yeah, it is weird, all right. Was that the Ohio State start time, too? Was that 4 or was that 3:30?
That was 3:30.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Okay.
that'll turn into a night game by about 5 minutes left in the first quarter, so
Yeah.
that should be a good
Yep.
time. Bundle up. It's a stripe out up at Penn State, so if you're going to the game, check your email, figure out what section you're sitting in, and it'll tell you whether to wear white or to wear blue. So maybe a little gimmicky, but it's fun. They've done it a couple times now, taken after Iowa and some other schools that have started to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Penn State has great traditions. Obviously, the whiteout. The stripe out does look cool. They've done it a couple times now. Interesting to see if it's really. I looked at the weather. It said maybe chance of rain. It's going to be cold, so you have to wonder if the ponchos come out and what the stripe out ultimately look like. But hopefully, it's a nice send off for the seniors that gave so much to this football team, to the university. Obviously they came in, many of these guys, in difficult times and probably would never have expected last season, even this season, their wildest dreams. So hopefully they get a nice send-off in front of 107+ thousand.
They're going to get a nice send-off this weekend and a nice send-off from us next weekend on the show as we join you once again on Monday night at 8 o'clock p.m. every Monday on the Nittany Lion Sports Report. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.